Moving abroad gives you the opportunity to create a new life, have new life experiences, and it also gives you the opportunity to create wealth and take advantage of new investing opportunities. However, if building wealth is one of your goals when you move abroad, that doesn't necessarily mean swinging the bat at every opportunity that comes your way. So in this video, I'm going to give you my perspective on how to build wealth abroad, take advantage of new opportunities whilst doing so effectively and in a way that works for you. Let's get right into it. If you're new here, my name's Jonny. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living and working in Madrid in Spain for the past 4.5 years approximately. On this channel, I talk all things living abroad, a lot of content covering, of course, Spain, but I also talk investing, personal finance, and building wealth. As someone who comes from a finance background, this is something that's of interest to me, and it's something that I've looked into actively in the different countries that I've lived in when I've moved abroad. That said, what you hear in this video is not financial or investing advice. I'm not a financial advisor, and you should always discuss with a professional to understand the specifics of your situation. Now that's out of the way, let's get into the video. So first thing, before we even get into, what can I invest in, what's good for me, I think you got to give yourself a reminder of what is your overall wealth building strategy. What stage of life are you at and what are your goals? Are you a younger person with fewer responsibilities, with a greater time horizon to build wealth, so perhaps you're more open to riskier opportunities? Or are you further on in life and you have an established portfolio of different assets and your goal is wealth conservation for when you perhaps get to the retirement age if you're not yet there already? And I think by doing that, you put a kind of safeguard in place against, getting stars in your eyes because you heard about the next best thing since sliced bread from somebody who says you need to invest your money in this because it's one of the best things that's available in X country. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not right for your strategy. Maybe that's not what you're trying to do. And before you make any of those decisions, it's important to remind yourself why you're doing what it is you're doing with your money. Now, if you're not exactly sure what your starting point is and you want to have a visual kind of what your starting point is, mapping out all your assets in an Excel book, you can head over to my website and you can download my net worth tracker, which is on offer at the time of uploading this video. You get a 50% discount on the download. You can input a list of different assets and liabilities, from property to different investments to cash holdings you have to alternative investments and lifestyle use assets. You can also input them in different currencies and update the exchange rate, and you can also create a history to be able to track your net worth over time to see how it has evolved. So if you think that would be helpful for you, then check out the link in the video description where it will take you to the download page. All right, now point number 2. Let's say that an investment opportunity does come along, you know what your goal is, and you're trying to assess, is this the right thing for me? So definitely start by looking at understanding the legal and practical assets of having this investment. It's important to remember, of course, that 9 times out of 10 in a foreign country, things won't work like in your home country. But not only that, you need to understand if having an asset or investment vehicle or whatever it may be in a foreign country creates new obligations in your home country or in your country of residence, because it can be the case. For US citizens who, maybe open a bank account outside of the US, then, the institution they're opening the bank account with may have reporting requirements to the IRS. I think it's the IRS. Correct me if I'm wrong, Americans, in the comments. But yeah, essentially that financial institution in country X will have to report to the relevant authority in the United States that John Doe, for example, has opened a bank account here and has a bank account in his name. Another example might be that if you're a tax resident in Spain and you have assets that are outside of the country and their total value is more than 50,000 euros, say for example, you add up your stocks, bank accounts, your properties that are outside of Spain, then you have to report them to the Spanish tax authorities via a particular form. So it's not to say that you can't have assets outside of the country, but there will be a reporting requirement on your part to the Spanish tax authorities to make them aware of the assets that you hold outside of Spain that either have a value of or their combined value together is greater than 50,000 euros. Think about things as well, like what you can and can't do with that asset, if there's minimum investment requirements, if there's a minimum holding period, for example, if there's an obligation to close, if there's any penalization for early closure, if there's any taxes that you owe either in the country where the asset is located or in your home country as well. So another example here could be a UK ISA. Now an ISA in the UK, for those of you who are not familiar, is essentially a tax shielded product. It can be in the form of, cash savings or stocks and shares, and there's a couple of other forms as well. I'm going to take the stocks and shares example because it best demonstrates the point I'm trying to make here. So if you invest in a stocks and shares ISA, ISA, you buy some stocks, for example, or you receive dividends in there, anything that you do within that ISA, whether it's, making capital gains or receiving dividends, is tax-free because it's within the tax shielded product. That's in the UK as a UK tax resident. Now, let's say I move to Spain and I've still got my ISA and I receive a dividend from a company that's within my UK ISA, for example. Whilst I might not need to pay dividend tax in the UK because of the ISA, I will still need to pay dividend tax in Spain because Spain doesn't recognize that tax shielding from the UK. They still see it as you've received a dividend, you owe tax on that if you're a Spanish tax resident. And a further point on top of that is that I'm a Spanish tax resident now, I've left the UK tax year is over, I can no longer contribute further to that ISA because I'm not a UK resident. Only UK residents can contribute to ISAs during the tax years that they're resident in the UK. So you can see there's quite a lot of factors that come into play. Which ones are applicable to you will very much depend again on what it is you're investing in, where you're putting your money, those kind of things. But just have a think about what possible implications investing in something or opening a bank account somewhere could have, both in that country and any other countries where you have, tax reporting requirements or your home country obligations, etc. Now let's move on to number 3, which is closely linked to the first point that we mentioned, and it's how does this asset, how does this investment, this bank account you're opening, etc., how does it fit into your overall strategy? If we take an example of the UK ISA, if you move into the UK and open an ISA, it's very hard to argue against that being, in your best interest because you're able to maintain your investing strategy, continue investing, continue saving, and any returns you have are essentially tax-free whilst you're tax resident in the UK. So if you're staying in the UK medium to long term, then certainly something interesting that you can look into. If you're not staying in the UK for very long, then you can open an ISA, but just beware that wherever you're moving to after that and will become a tax resident will have its own tax legislation regarding taxation on dividends and capital gains. Like, for example, if I move to Spain and then I sell some assets or I receive some dividends within my ISA, they'll probably be taxable within Spain. But if I were to move to the UAE, for example, say I'm living in Dubai, then Dubai has no capital gains tax, it has no dividend tax. So I would effectively still be getting the benefits under the ISA. Let's take another example, opening a bank account abroad. Let's take Georgia, for example. So Georgia, pretty much anyone, even non-residents, can turn up to a bank in Georgia and just open a bank account and start putting money in. It sounds really cool. You have a bank account overseas, you've diversified kind of your banking, and you're getting high interest rates. At the time of doing this video, you can get around 9%, but then past it's been 10, 11%, depending on the time and depending on the bank. That said, does that mean everybody should go to Georgia and go and open a bank account abroad? No. Because despite those high interest rates, the Georgian lari is a volatile currency, much more than the likes of the euro, the pound, the USD, so your money can fluctuate greatly in value. So for someone who's risk averse and is more focused on capital preservation, that's probably not a good move to put your money in a currency like that. In addition, in the likes of the US, the UK, the EU, you've got very high deposit protection schemes. In the US, up to $250,000 in an FDIC insured bank. In the UK, you're insured up to about £85,000 under the FSCS. In the EU, typically you're insured up to about 100,000 euros in the case of bank failure. In Georgia, it's only 30,000 lari, which is about 10,000 euros, perhaps a little bit less. And so if you were going to be putting large sums of money in the bank in Georgia, then it perhaps won't be covered to the extent that it would be in the likes of the EU, the UK, the US. And here, I've talked about banking and investing, but the same can apply with property. You might be interested in buying a property in a country, but run the numbers carefully, understand what the property rules are, understand if purchasing this property, investing in this property, whatever the purpose is, fits into your overall wealth building, your overall portfolio strategy. Because you might think that buying works out best, and maybe it does, but perhaps if you run the numbers and look in detail, then maybe it works out that renting is the better option for you. I don't know, this is going to depend on the country, circumstances, etc. There's no one answer. The point I'm trying to make is do your research and consider how what it is you're looking at fit into your overall strategy. And number 4, super important. Let's say that you've done your analysis, you think it might be a good fit. Do not overlook this last step, which is if you open that bank account, if you go and purchase that property, if you go ahead with that investing vehicle, whatever it may be, what is your exit strategy? How are you going to get out of that investment when it's either served its purpose or if things go wrong? And what are the implications in doing so? As I mentioned in point number 2, is there a minimum holding period? What tax will you owe on the sale of assets if you make capital gains? Are there any reporting obligations, penalties you might face because you didn't have the asset for long enough? enough or didn't open it for long enough, or by needing to close it, you have to pay like a closing fee, for example. And so I talked about an absolute horror story I had with a French investing account. So I opened something which is a little bit similar to an ISA in the UK. It's called a PEA. And so by investing in companies, ETFs that were domiciled within the EU, that essentially allowed me kind of a capital gains tax exemption and a dividend tax exemption. If I were to hold the account, not the assets, I could do what I want with the assets within the portfolio for a minimum period of 5 years. It would essentially give me a French capital gains / dividend tax exemption on any gains realized over that period of time. Unfortunately, I never made it to the 5 years because despite my understanding being that, yes, I could hold this account once I left France. I could keep the account open, I could hold my assets, which is technically true. The financial institution that I opened the account with had something in their fine print which, went against that. It was like, if you leave France, you have to close the account. And it was a complete show, quite frankly, like massive headache. If you want to see the story, I'll leave the link in the video description. But just me missing that, it created a massive headache, and it was, it could have been avoided. I could have moved all my investments to a different provider before I left France, kept the assets, not had to sell them, all that kind of stuff. But because I didn't give my exit strategy from that investment the correct attention and planning, it created a problem for me. Conversely, with the property that I'm sitting in now, that I purchased, that I live in, I came up with an exit plan. So I have a couple of strategies that I can employ the day that I decide to move on from this property, whether that's sell it, whether it's rented out, etc. So I talked quite a lot about quite a lot of things there, guys. So just to bring it all together here at the end. So before you get started, make sure that you know exactly what your strategy is, what it is that you're trying to achieve, and don't get carried away, because that will keep you grounded and stop you getting carried away with investing opportunities that look exciting but could end up ultimately being a headache for you. It's super important to understand all of the legal and practical implications of having assets abroad, opening bank accounts, investing in stocks, shares, whatever, in a different country. So make sure that you understand them properly. Make sure that if you are going to do something, invest in something, that it does fit in nicely to your broader investment strategy. And finally, always have an exit strategy in place before you purchase an asset, and have it thought out carefully. And so by taking these steps, you're more likely to make the right choices for you and enjoy your life abroad whilst taking advantage of the investment opportunities that come your way. So I hope you found this video interesting and helpful, guys. Leave a comment and let me know what your experience has been with investing in foreign assets, opening bank accounts abroad, etc. And if there's any lessons that you've learned along the way as well. So next time, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.